I didn't notice it at first. People just slowly stopped seeing me. Not all at once. Not in any way I could point to and say, that's when it happened. It was gradual, the way light fades at the end of a day. You don't catch the exact moment the sun goes down. You just look up one evening and realize the room has gotten dark. I was around 74 when I first felt it. I was standing in line at a hardware store, waiting my turn, when the young man behind the counter looked past me to the person behind me. Not rudely, not with any malice. He just didn't see me. When I stepped forward and said, "Excuse me?" he looked mildly startled, like I'd appeared out of nowhere. I laughed it off on the drive home. But I thought about it for the rest of the week. That's the thing nobody tells you about getting older as a man. It's not the body slowing down that hits hardest. It's not the aching joints, or the longer recovery, or the way stairs feel different than they used to. What hits hardest is the slow, quiet realization that you've become less visible to the world around you. That the space you once occupied, in a room, in a conversation, in the minds of people you pass on the street, has quietly shrunk. And here's what makes it strange. Nobody does it on purpose. There's no moment of cruelty you can point to. The world doesn't decide to look away from older men. It just stops looking. The way you stop noticing a piece of furniture that's been in the same corner for 30 years. It's not hostility. It's something quieter and harder to name. And in some ways, that makes it worse. I spent most of my working life being the kind of man people paid attention to. I had a career where my opinions were sought out. I'd walk into meetings, and people would turn toward me. I'm not saying that to boast. I'm saying it because most men who've worked hard through their 40s and 50s know exactly what I mean. There's a kind of quiet authority that builds over decades. Not power exactly, but presence. And you don't realize how much of your sense of self is tied to that presence until it starts to fade. It went slowly for me. First, from professional rooms, which made sense. I had retired. Then from social rooms, which I noticed, but told myself was just the natural shrinking of life. And then from everyday moments, the cashier, the waiter, the neighbor who used to stop and talk, and now just waves from a distance. Each one felt small on its own. Together, they added up to something I didn't have a word for. My wife noticed before I admitted it to myself. She said, "You seem like you're somewhere else lately." And I told her I was fine, which was the answer I always gave, which is the answer most men my age give, because we were taught that the correct response to feeling diminished is to stand straighter and say nothing. That was the whole instruction manual we were handed as boys. Carry it without complaint. Don't make it about you. So I carried it. I sat with it on early mornings on the porch, coffee in hand, watching the neighborhood wake up around me, feeling like a man watching a film he used to be in. Not bitter. I want to be clear about that. I was never an angry man about these things, but there was a kind of dull ache in it that I couldn't quite put down. What I kept coming back to was this question I couldn't answer. When did I stop being someone people were curious about? Because that's what invisibility really is, I think. It's not that people stop seeing your body, they see it. They see an old man. What they stop seeing is everything inside you. The part still forming opinions, still changing your mind, still lying awake at night thinking about questions you haven't solved. The assumption settles in, quietly, that there's nothing new left to discover, that you've already said everything you have to say. I started paying attention to how I moved through conversations, and I noticed something uncomfortable. In groups, especially with younger people, I'd begin a thought and watch attention drift before I finished it. Not out of rudeness. I don't think it was that. But younger conversations move at a different pace, a different rhythm, and an older man speaking from reflection rather than speed doesn't always fit that rhythm. So you slow the room down, and people start looking for the exit. I tried adjusting. I spoke less. Then I wondered if speaking less made it worse, confirming the assumption that I didn't have much to offer. I tried being more direct, getting to the point faster. That felt wrong too, like I was performing someone else's version of relevance. What I eventually understood, and it took me longer than I'd like to admit, is that the invisibility I was feeling wasn't entirely coming from outside me. Or rather, it was. But I was the one giving it weight. I had built a version of myself that depended on being seen, and I didn't even realize it until that structure started to collapse. The men I've known who seem most at peace with this stage of life share something in common. They stopped needing to be the ones being seen and started becoming genuinely interested in what they could see. There's a difference between a man who enters a room hoping to be noticed and a man who enters a room and notices everything in it. The second man doesn't become invisible, not to the people who matter, because his attention becomes the thing that draws others in. Real attention is rare, and older men, once they stop performing, have a depth of presence most younger people are too distracted to offer. I got there eventually, not cleanly, not without long mornings on that porch, sitting with thoughts I didn't particularly enjoy. But I got there, and what I found wasn't what I expected. I expected resignation, a quiet acceptance of being less. What I found instead was something closer to freedom. When you stop needing to be seen by every room you walk into, you get to choose which rooms matter. You invest your attention where it's earned, and stop giving it away where it never was. If you're somewhere in the middle of this, if you're feeling that quiet shrinking and haven't found the words for it yet, what you're carrying is real. It's not vanity. It's not weakness. It's what happens when a man who has lived, built, and mattered has to learn how to hold that life without needing it reflected back at him. The world may look past you sometimes. That part is true. But there's a version of this life where that stops mattering as much, where you become so settled in who you are and so genuinely interested in the people in front of you that being overlooked no longer feels like loss. It just feels quiet. And after a lifetime of noise, quiet turns out to be one of the better gifts.